I'm Sophia, 32 years old, and until last month, I thought I had built the perfect life with my husband Jake. Growing up in foster care taught me to value stability above all else. When I met Jake, his warm family seemed like the answer to my prayers until his mother Eleanor moved in after becoming widowed. What started as temporary compassion twisted into a nightmare I never saw coming. Before I tell you how my own home became a battleground, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of reclaiming my dignity. My story begins 8 years ago. As a nurse working the night shift at Memorial Hospital, I had dedicated my life to caring for others. I worked my way through nursing school, picking up extra shifts whenever I could, determined to build a career that would give me the stability I never had growing up in the foster system. My parents died when I was only 6 years old in a car accident, and without any other family members willing to take me in, I bounced between foster homes throughout my childhood. Some were kind enough, others were just collecting a check. The experience taught me to be self-sufficient and to value stability more than anything else. I met Jake on a particularly hectic Tuesday evening. He was visiting his college roommate who had appendicitis, and he seemed lost trying to navigate the hospital corridors. I was rushing to my next patient but stopped to give him directions. There was something about his genuine smile and the way he thanked me that made my heart flutter in a way I hadn't experienced before. 3 days later, he returned to the hospital, not to visit his friend, who had already been discharged, but to bring me coffee and ask me to dinner. Our connection was immediate and intense. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Jake was an architect with a promising career at one of the city's top firms. He was creative, ambitious, and unlike anyone I had ever dated before. His passion for his work matched my dedication to nursing, and we understood each other's commitment to our respective careers. After a year of dating, Jake proposed during a weekend trip to the coast. I remember feeling like my life had finally fallen into place. The stable, loving relationship I had always dreamed of was becoming a reality. Our wedding was beautiful, but not without early warning signs I chose to ignore. Jake's mother, Eleanor, insisted on being involved in every decision, from the flowers to the seating chart. During the reception, she hardly left Jake's side, pulling him away whenever he and I had a moment alone. I dismissed it as a mother's emotional attachment on her son's big day. "She's just emotional," Jake explained when I mentioned it later. "You're taking her only son. It's bound to be difficult for her." I nodded, understanding and compassionate. After all, wasn't family what I had longed for my entire life? With our combined savings, we purchased a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. I contributed significantly to the down payment, using almost all of my savings money I had carefully set aside since my first job as a teenager. The house needed some work, but Jake had the vision and skills to transform it into our dream home. We spent weekends painting walls, refinishing floors, and shopping for furniture. Those early days of marriage were filled with laughter and dreams of the future. Jake's relationship with his mother was close. He called her several times a week, and we had Sunday dinners at her house monthly. His father was quieter, a retired accountant, who seemed content to let Eleanor take the lead in family matters. I found their relationship sweet initially. Coming from a background without family, I appreciated the close bonds they maintained. However, during those Sunday dinners, I began noticing small things. Eleanor would question my career choices, suggesting that perhaps I should consider reducing my hours once Jake and I started a family. She would subtly criticize my cooking, offering to teach me the proper way to make Jake's favorite dishes. She rearranged the table settings I had carefully prepared, claiming her way was family tradition. Jake and I had discussed having children, but we agreed to wait a few years. I wanted to advance in my career first, perhaps move into a specialized nursing role, and Jake was focused on making partner at his firm. Eleanor, however, frequently brought up the topic of grandchildren, often reminding me that I wasn't getting any younger. Despite these occasional uncomfortable moments, our first 3 years of marriage were happy ones. Jake and I worked hard in our careers, traveled when we could, and continued improving our home. We developed a dynamic that worked for us. I was the practical one, making sure bills were paid on time, and we stayed within our budget, while Jake was the dreamer, always thinking about our next renovation project or vacation. Then 4 years into our marriage, Jake's father died suddenly of a heart attack. The loss was devastating for both Jake and Eleanor. At the funeral, Eleanor clung to Jake, barely acknowledging me or anyone else. I understood her grief and did everything I could to support both her and Jake during this difficult time. A week after the funeral, Jake came home with news that would unknowingly change the course of our lives forever. "I've asked Mum to stay with us for a while," he said as we prepared dinner. "She shouldn't be alone in that big house right now. I think it would be good for her to stay here until she figures out what she wants to do next." I paused, a sudden uneasiness settling in my stomach. But looking at Jake's worried expression, I pushed my concerns aside. This was what family did for each other, right? They supported one another in times of need. "Of course," I said, squeezing his hand. "She can stay as long as she needs to." If only I had known what "as long as she needs to" would come to mean. The guest room quickly became Eleanor's room. Jake helped her pack up some of her things, what was supposed to be enough for a few weeks, and move them into our home. I bought fresh flowers for her nightstand and stocked the bathroom with her favourite toiletries, determined to make her feel welcome and comfortable during her time of grief. The first weeks were exactly what you would expect when helping someone through loss. Eleanor spent a lot of time in her room, emerging mainly for meals which I prepared with extra care. I sat with her in the evenings when I wasn't working, looking through old photo albums as she shared stories about her life with Jake's father. I held her hand when she cried and made sure she was taking her medications properly, my nursing instincts kicking in naturally. Jake was grateful for my support and I was happy to provide it. After all, Eleanor had lost her partner of 40 years. Her grief was profound and deserved compassion. "You're an angel," Jake whispered to me one night as we got ready for bed. "Mum told me today how lucky I am to have you." I smiled, warmed by the compliment and the feeling that I was truly part of this family. But as the weeks turned into months, subtle shifts began occurring in our household dynamic. It started with small things, Eleanor rearranging the kitchen cabinets while I was at work because it made more sense to have the glasses closer to the refrigerator. She reorganized the linen closet without asking, discarding some of the older towels I had been saving for cleaning days. "I thought I would help out," she would say when I discovered these changes. "You work so hard at the hospital, the least I can do is make things more efficient around here." I tried to be understanding. After all, Eleanor had managed her own household for decades, and she was probably trying to find purpose in her new circumstances. But as more time passed, her helpful adjustments became more intrusive. 3 months into her stay, Eleanor started commenting on my work schedule more directly. "Nurses are so overworked," she said one morning as I prepared to leave for a 12-hour shift. "I don't know why they need you there so often. Jake barely sees you." "My schedule has always been this way," I replied calmly. "Jake understands." "Well, it can't be healthy for your marriage." In my day, a wife made sure to be home more. Jake, who had been quietly eating his breakfast during this exchange, finally spoke up, but not in my defense. "Mum does have a point, Soph. We don't get a lot of time together with your shifts." Again, it was the first instance where I felt them aligning against me and a knot formed in my stomach. Still, I brushed it off, assuming Jake was just worried about spending quality time together. By the 4th month, Eleanor had essentially taken over the kitchen. My cooking was too bland, too spicy, too experimental, or not traditional enough for her tastes. She began planning our meals and doing the grocery shopping, often purchasing items I knew Jake didn't particularly like, but had grown up eating. "Jake always loved my pot roast," she would say, when I mentioned his preference for lighter meals during the week. "A man needs proper food, especially when he works as hard as he does." Meanwhile, Jake seemed oblivious to the building tension. When I tried to discuss the situation with him, he would dismiss my concerns. "Mom is just trying to help out Sophia. She needs to feel useful right now. Can't you be a little more understanding? She lost Dad for God's sake." The right now of Eleanor's stay stretched into 5 months, then 6, with no mention of her returning to her own home or finding a new place. When I delicately approached the subject with Jake, suggesting we might help Eleanor look for a smaller place nearby, he looked at me as if I had suggested abandoning his mother on the street. "She's not ready, Sophia. Why are you so eager to get rid of her? This house is plenty big enough for all of us." It was during this period that I discovered Eleanor had been going through my personal belongings. I came home early from work one day with a migraine and found her in our bedroom looking through my jewellery box. "Oh, you startled me," she said, not appearing particularly embarrassed at being caught. "I was looking for that pearl necklace you wore to the Thompsons' dinner party. I thought it might go well with my outfit for church tomorrow." I stood frozen in the doorway, my head pounding from both the migraine and the violation I felt. "You could have asked me, Eleanor. We're family, dear. I didn't think you'd mind." But I did mind. I minded very much, and the incident marked a turning point in my perception of our living situation. What had started as a compassionate gesture was slowly transforming into an invasion of my home and my marriage. Eleanor's territorial behavior increased. She began referring to rooms in the house as hers, not just her bedroom, but her kitchen, her living room, her garden. She started making decisions about our home without consulting me, from changing the curtains to rearranging the furniture in the living room. "This layout makes much more sense," she declared, after I came home to find our sofa and chairs completely rearranged. The old way blocked the natural flow of the room. When I tried to establish boundaries, Eleanor would tear up and Jake would accuse me of being insensitive. "She's just trying to make herself feel at home," he would say. "Why do you have to make everything into such a big deal?" It was becoming clear that in Jake's eyes, his mother's comfort took precedence over mine, despite the fact that I was his wife, and this was supposedly our home together. The 6-month anniversary of Eleanor's temporary move came and went without any acknowledgement from Jake or discussion about future plans. When I brought up the subject of Eleanor's house, which was sitting empty except for monthly checks from Jake to maintain it, Jake shut down the conversation immediately. "Now isn't the time, Sophia? Mum will decide when she's ready to go back." But I was beginning to wonder if that time would ever come, or if Eleanor had decided that her permanent place was right here between me and my husband. By the 8th month of Eleanor's stay, the strain was beginning to show in all aspects of my life. Working 12-hour shifts at the hospital was exhausting enough, but coming home to navigate the emotional minefield that my house had become left me perpetually drained. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned from a particularly difficult shift where we had lost a long-term patient. All I wanted was the comfort of my own home and some quiet time to process my emotions. Instead, I walked into what felt like a different house entirely. Eleanor had completely redecorated our living room while I was at work. The warm, earth-toned paint we had carefully selected was now covered with a sterile pale blue. The artwork Jake and I had collected from local artists during our travels had been removed, replaced with Eleanor's formal family portraits and landscapes that had previously hung in her own home. "What happened here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as the shock settled in. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. My dish towel, the set Jake had given me for Christmas with the embroidered herbs that matched our kitchen theme. "It needed refreshing," she said simply, as if changing the entire aesthetic of someone else's home without permission was perfectly normal. "That earthy colour you had chosen was making the space look small and dark. This brightens everything up." I stood in silence, trying to process not just the change itself, but the audacity of making such a significant alteration without even mentioning it to me. "You should have asked us first." I finally managed my exhaustion, quickly giving way to anger. Eleanor's expression hardened. "I did discuss it with Jake. He said it was fine. He said you could completely repaint and redecorate our living room." "Our living room," she corrected, emphasizing the word, in a way that made it clear she considered herself a permanent resident, not a guest. And yes, Jake understands that I have an eye for these things. He grew up in a beautiful home. The implication that my taste was somehow inferior made my blood boil, but I held my tongue until Jake came home. When he arrived and I expressed my frustration, his response was worse than Eleanor's actions. "Mum was just trying to surprise us," he said dismissively. "And honestly, it does look brighter in here. You're overreacting, Sophia." Overreacting. She completely changed our living room without asking me. She asked me, and I'm tired of having the same argument. Mom is living here too now. She should be able to make the place comfortable for herself. The words "living here too now" hit me like a physical blow. There was no temporary anymore. In Jake's mind, his mother had become a permanent fixture in our home. Our private time as a couple had already been dwindling, but it vanished completely when Eleanor began developing convenient health concerns whenever Jake and I planned to go out alone. Mysterious chest pains that disappeared as soon as we cancelled our reservations. Dizzy spells that precisely coincided with weekend getaways we had booked. I can't leave her alone if she's not feeling well. Jake would insist, and I would relent, because what kind of nurse, what kind of person would I be if I didn't? My social life suffered next. I stopped inviting friends over after Eleanor humiliated me at a small dinner party we hosted for my birthday. As my colleague Amanda was telling a story about a mix-up at the hospital, Eleanor interrupted with a loud sigh. "Sophia never could tell a story properly," she said to the table at large. "Remember when she gave that toast at your cousin's wedding, Jake? So awkward." Let me tell everyone about the time Sophia tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. What a disaster. She proceeded to share an exaggerated account of my first attempt at hosting Thanksgiving, highlighting every small mistake and admitting the fact that despite some timing issues, everyone had enjoyed the meal. My friends sat uncomfortably as Eleanor dominated the conversation for the rest of the evening, telling story after story that painted me as incompetent. After that night, I made excuses when friends suggested coming over. It was easier than exposing them and myself to Eleanor's undermining behaviour. The situation escalated dramatically when Eleanor accidentally broke a small glass figurine that had belonged to my mother. It was one of the few items I had from my parents, a delicate blue bird that I kept on my bedside table. I came home to find it shattered, the pieces collected in a small trash can. What happened to my bird? I asked, my heart sinking as I saw the fragments of blue glass. Oh, I was dusting and it slipped, Eleanor said without looking up from her magazine. It was rather fragile, wasn't it? There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what the item had meant to me. When I told Jake about it that night, struggling to hold back tears as I explained that it was one of my few connections to my parents, his response was devastating. It was an accident, Sophia. Mum feels terrible about it. She didn't seem terrible when she told me. She didn't even apologize. Well, you probably made her feel too guilty to apologize properly. You know how sensitive she can be. I was speechless. Somehow, I had become the villain for being upset about the destruction of one of my most treasured possessions. The comments about my inability to give Jake children began shortly after. Eleanor would make casual remarks within my hearing about how some women just aren't meant to be mothers, or how the Thompson boy married a girl who gave him twins right away. Now that's a proper wife. Jake and I had agreed to wait to start a family, but Eleanor's constant comments made me wonder if he had been sharing our private discussions with her, or if she had simply decided this was another area where I was failing. One evening, I came home early and overheard Eleanor talking to Jake in the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, not intending to eavesdrop, but frozen by what I heard. You married beneath you, Jake, Eleanor was saying softly. I tried to be supportive, but it's been almost 5 years, and what has she given you? No children, a house that's barely a home. You deserve better than a wife who's barely here. I expected, hoped, prayed to hear my husband defend me. Instead, there was silence followed by, Mom, it's complicated. Sophia works hard. Is that enough? Eleanor pressed. Is that really what you want for your life? I backed away silently, my heart shattering. Not just because of Eleanor's words, but because of Jake's failure to reject them outright. From that day forward, Jake became increasingly critical of me. The way I dressed, the hours I worked, the meals I managed to prepare on my days off, nothing was good enough anymore. He started coming home later, often having already eaten dinner, with clients, or at the office. My colleague Amanda noticed the change in me at work. You're not yourself lately, she said during a quiet moment in the break room. What's going on at home? I broke down and told her everything. Eleanor's takeover of my home, Jake's betrayal of our partnership, the growing feeling that I was a stranger in my own life. That's not normal, Sophia, Amanda said firmly. What she's doing is called emotional abuse, and Jake is enabling it. You need to stand up for yourself. Tope. Her words gave me courage. That weekend, I attempted to talk to Jake about setting some boundaries and discussing a timeline for Eleanor to find her own place. It's been almost a year, I pointed out carefully. I think it might be healthy for everyone if we helped your mum transition back to independence. We could look at condos nearby, something easier for her to maintain than her old house. Jake's reaction was immediate and hostile. I can't believe how selfish you're being, Cus, he snapped. My mother lost her husband of 40 years, and all you can think about is getting her out of your hair. This is my house too, and I say she stays as long as she wants. But Jake, this isn't healthy for our marriage. We never have time alone anymore, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in my own home. Then maybe the problem is you, he said coldly. Mom has never had an issue sharing space with family. The word family hung in the air between us. The implication was clear in Jake's mind. Eleanor was family. I was becoming something else entirely. The real breaking point came 13 months into Eleanor's stay. I was watering plants in our front yard when Mrs. Lawson from across the street came over to chat. Your mother-in-law was telling us about her plans for the house, she said casually. She mentioned you and Jake might be moving out soon, that she's thinking of having the master bedroom redone once you're gone. I froze the watering can, tipping in my hand and soaking my shoes. "I'm sorry, what?" Mrs. Lawson looked confused. "Oh, I assumed you knew. Eleanor mentioned it at the neighborhood watch meeting last week. She said now that the house is hers, she's planning some major renovations." My mind reeled as I made some non-committal response and quickly excused myself. Eleanor had been telling the neighbors that she owned our house, that Jake and I would be moving out. It was beyond comprehension. 2 days later, I returned from work 3 hours early, having swapped shifts with another nurse. As I turned onto our street, I noticed an unfamiliar car in our driveway. Entering quietly through the side door, I heard Eleanor's voice coming from the living room. "The kitchen would be the first thing to go," she was saying. "It's terribly outdated, and the master bath needs a complete overhaul." I stepped into the doorway to find Eleanor, showing a woman in a business suit around our home. The woman was taking notes on a tablet. "Eleanor," I interrupted. "What's going on here?" Both women turned Eleanor's expression, briefly showing surprise, before settling into something resembling annoyance at the interruption. "Sophia, you're home early. This is Barbara Jenkins from Westside Realty. She's helping me evaluate some renovation options." The realtor extended her hand. "Nice to meet you. Your mother-in-law has a wonderful vision for updating this place." "Hi, Jen." I ignored the outstretched hand. I wasn't aware we were planning renovations or consulting with realtors. Eleanor laughed lightly, the sound like glass breaking. "Jake and I have been discussing some changes. Nothing finalized yet, of course. Barbara is just giving us some insights on what would add the most value. I think I need to speak with my mother-in-law privately," I said to the realtor, who glanced between us uncertainly. "Perhaps I should come back another time," Barbara suggested, gathering her things. "Eleanor, we can continue this conversation later." After showing the realtor out, I turned to Eleanor, struggling to control my anger. "What exactly are you and Jake discussing about our house that I'm not being included in?" Eleanor settled herself on the sofa, the new cream-coloured one she had purchased to replace our comfortable sectional, claiming it was more sophisticated. "Jake knows the house needs updating. He agrees with me that the current state is adequate at best. He's given me the authority to explore options." "Given you the authority? This is my house too. I'm on the deed. I contributed to the down payment." Eleanor's smile was cold. "Jake mentioned you might be difficult about the necessary changes. That's why he simplified things." "Simplified what things?" "The decision-making process. Jake understands that I have experience in home management that you lack." I was speechless. When Jake came home that evening, I was waiting, my hands shaking with a combination of anger and fear. Why was a realtor in our house today? And why does your mother think she has authority to make decisions about our home? Jake set down his briefcase slowly. "Mum told me you overreacted." "Overreacted, Jake. She's acting like she owns our house. The neighbor told me Eleanor's been saying the house is hers and that we're moving out. What's going on?" He sighed, looking annoyed rather than concerned. "Mom's just exploring some renovation options. I gave her my blessing to look into it. The house could use some updating and she has the time and expertise." Without consulting me, "Jake, this is my house too. I put my savings into this place." "Our house," he corrected. "And yes, Mum and I have discussed some changes that might make sense financially. I didn't think it was necessary to bother you with the details given your schedule." The casual dismissal of my right to be involved in decisions about my own home was staggering. "What else have you and your mother decided without bothering to include me?" Jake's expression hardened. "I've added Mom as an authorized user on some of our accounts. She's been handling some of the household expenses and bill payments since you're so busy." The room seemed to tilt around me. "You gave your mother access to our financial accounts without telling me. She's helping us, Sophia. Why are you being so ungrateful? Do you know how many people would love to have someone like Mom taking care of things?" I couldn't process what was happening. The next day at work, I had a panic attack in the supply closet, hyperventilating as the full weight of Jake's betrayal sank in. Amanda found me there and helped me through it, then sat with me during our break as I explained the latest developments. "Sophia, this is serious," she said. "They're financially isolating you. You need to protect yourself." With Amanda's help, I began investigating exactly what Jake had done. We discovered he had indeed added Eleanor as an authorized user on 2 of our credit cards and given her online access to our joint checking account. What was more disturbing was finding that Jake had opened a new account with just him and Eleanor as signatories, and had been transferring small amounts from our joint savings into it monthly. I contacted a financial advisor and an attorney, secretly using my lunch breaks and Amanda's address for any correspondence. The attorney confirmed that as a co-owner of the house, my rights couldn't be easily dismissed regardless of what Jake or Eleanor might believe. I secured copies of all important documents, the house deed, our marriage certificate, financial records, and my personal identification papers, and stored them in a secure location at Amanda's apartment. I also began building an emergency fund in an account only I could access, transferring small amounts from my personal spending money each week. Jake's birthday fell during this period, and Eleanor insisted on hosting a dinner party at our house, or as she now freely called it, her house. I participated robotically, serving the meal Eleanor had prepared and sitting silently as she dominated the conversation with our friends. During dessert, Eleanor tapped her glass to make an announcement. Now that Jake's birthday celebrations are properly underway, I wanted to share some exciting news. I've decided to remodel the master bedroom and bath next month. Jake and Sophia will be temporarily moving to the guest room while the work is being done. Our friends looked at me with confusion, clearly wondering why this was the first I was hearing about such a major change. Jake shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing to contradict his mother. Actually, I said, my voice stronger than I expected, Jake and I haven't discussed or agreed to any remodeling plans. An awkward silence fell over the table. Eleanor's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Jake and I have gone over all the details already, dear. I didn't want to burden you with it, given how exhausted you always are from work. I looked directly at Jake. Is that true? We've discussed remodeling our bedroom. All eyes turned to him, and for a moment I thought he might finally stand with me. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, Mum and I have looked at some options. The renovation would add value to the house. The public undermining continued the following week at a hospital fundraiser that Jake and Eleanor attended with me. As I introduced them to my colleagues, Eleanor constantly interrupted with corrections or clarifications to what I was saying, positioning herself as the authority on our family and home life. Sophia means they're thinking of adding a sunroom, she would say, or Sophia gets confused about these things. The dinner party is actually next Friday, not Thursday. By the time we returned home, I was emotionally exhausted, but nothing prepared me for what I found the next day after returning from a morning shift. My personal items, my clothes, my books, my toiletries had been moved from the master bedroom to the guest room. Eleanor was directing a handyman who was measuring the master bedroom windows when I walked in. What's going on? I demanded. Why are my things in the guest room? Eleanor barely glanced at me. I decided to get started on the remodel. It made sense to move your things now rather than later. I need more space for the planning anyway. The handyman looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing the tension. You moved my personal belongings without asking me into the guest room of my own house. Don't be dramatic, Sophia. It's temporary. Unless, of course, you and Jake decide the guest room works better for you permanently. Something inside me snapped. Years of accommodating, compromising, and being slowly edged out of my own home culminated in this moment of absolute clarity. If I didn't stand up now, I would lose everything, not just my house, but my sense of self. This has gone far enough, I said, my voice steady, despite the rage and hurt bubbling inside me. You have no right to move my things or make decisions about this house. I want you to leave. Eleanor dismissed the handyman with a wave, waiting until he awkwardly shuffled out before turning to me with a look of cold amusement. Leave. This is my home now, Sophia. Jake understands that I need to be here. This is not your home. Jake and I bought this house together. My name is on the deed. Eleanor's smile was venomous. Such technicalities can be changed. Jake and I have been discussing the future, and frankly, you're not as essential to it as you seem to think. The blatant admission that they had been plotting against me sent a chill down my spine. I've tolerated your presence for over a year, I said, fighting to keep my composure. I've been patient, understanding, and accommodating while you've systematically taken over my home and undermined my marriage. But this ends now. You need to respect boundaries or find somewhere else to live. Eleanor's face hardened. You've never been good enough for my son. A real wife would have given him children by now instead of prioritizing her career. A real wife would be grateful for my help instead of being threatened by it. Help! I almost laughed. You've been deliberately pushing me out since the day you moved in. This was never about grief or needing family support. This was about control. You know nothing about family. Eleanor hissed, her facade finally cracking to reveal the contempt beneath. "You're an orphan who latched onto my son. You should be grateful we allowed you to be part of this family at all." The cruelty of her words struck me like a physical blow, but before I could respond, the front door opened and closed. Jake had come home early. He appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, looking between us with confusion. "What's going on?" "I could hear you from the driveway." Eleanor's transformation was immediate and disturbing. Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes as she rushed to Jake's side. "Oh, Jake," she sobbed, clutching his arm. "I was just trying to help with the renovation plans." And Sophia came home and started screaming at me. She said terrible things, that I'm not welcome here, that this isn't my home. Jake's expression darkened as he looked at me. "Is that true?" "Did you say that to Mom?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Jake." She moved all my things to the guest room without asking. She's been telling people she owns our house and making renovation plans without consulting me. "Because I asked her to look into renovations," Jake said sharply. "And the move to the guest room is temporary. Mum explained that to you." "No, she didn't explain anything. She just did it like she does everything else around here, without any regard for the fact that this is my home too." Eleanor continued, her performance tears streaming down her face. "I've tried so hard to be helpful to make this house a real home. I just want the best for both of you." "Jake," I said, trying to reach the man I had married. "Can't you see what's happening here? Your mother has been systematically pushing me out of decisions, out of rooms, and now literally out of our bedroom. This has to stop." Jake put his arm around his mother protectively. "I think you owe Mum an apology, Sophia. She's done nothing but try to help us, and you're treating her like an intruder." "An apology?" I was incredulous. "After everything she's done, after everything I've endured for over a year? No, I'm not apologizing. In fact, I think it's time your mother found her own place to live." Eleanor's crying intensified. Jake's face flushed with anger. "If anyone needs to find another place to live, maybe it's you," he said coldly. "Mum was right. You've never understood what family means." The words hung in the air between us like a physical barrier. In that moment, looking at Jake's face, I knew our marriage was over. The man I had loved, the partnership I had believed in, it had all been replaced by something toxic and unrecognizable. "So that's it?" I asked quietly. "After 5 years of marriage, you're choosing your mother over your wife." "I'm choosing respect and family loyalty over selfishness." Jake replied, his tone dismissive. "Mom needs us, and you can't seem to accept that." Eleanor peered at me from the safety of Jake's embrace, and for a brief moment, her tears subsided enough for me to catch a glimpse of triumph in her eyes. "Jake," she said in a trembling voice that somehow still managed to sound authoritative, "I can't stay where I'm not wanted. Perhaps Sophia needs some time to herself to reconsider her priorities." Jake straightened, his decision made. "I think you're right, Mom. Sophia, I think it would be best if you left for a while until you can treat my mother with the respect she deserves." I stood frozen in shock. "You're asking me to leave my own house?" "It's our house," Jake corrected again, "and right now you're the one causing problems." "If she doesn't want to leave, that's fine," Eleanor interjected with feigned magnanimity. "I can go to a hotel, though at my age being displaced like this." "No, Mom, you're not going anywhere," Jake said firmly. "Sophia can stay with a friend until she's ready to apologize and behave reasonably." The absurdity of it all, being told to leave my own home because I wouldn't bend to the will of my mother-in-law, might have made me laugh if it weren't so devastatingly painful. "Fine," I said finally, a strange calm settling over me as I accepted the reality of the situation. "I'll go, but don't expect an apology and don't expect me to come crawling back." I moved mechanically to the guest room where my belongings had been relocated. The sight of my personal items haphazardly piled on the bedclothes, unfolded books, stacked carelessly, the framed photo of my parents face down, reignited my anger, but I channeled it into purposeful action. I grabbed my largest suitcase from the closet and began packing essentials, enough clothes for a week, toiletries, my laptop, and a few sentimental items. Eleanor watched from the doorway, not bothering to hide her satisfaction now that Jake had retreated to the living room. "I always knew you weren't the right woman for Jake," she said softly, so only I could hear. "Too ambitious, too independent. A man needs someone who puts family first." I didn't respond, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing how deeply her words cut. Instead, I focused on gathering my things mentally, cataloguing what I would need to retrieve later. Once the suitcase was packed, I took my purse and a small bag where I kept my important documents: passport, social security card, nursing credentials, and the copy of our house deed I had thankfully secured. As I zipped the bag, Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "What are you taking in there?" "My personal documents," I replied evenly. "Unless you think those belong to you too." She didn't answer, but her suspicious gaze followed me as I carried my things down the stairs. Jake was sitting on the sofa staring straight ahead, his posture rigid with anger, or perhaps, though I might have been giving him too much credit, a hint of shame. "I've called Amanda," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "She's coming to pick me up." Jake nodded without looking at me. I stood in my own entryway, surrounded by the life we had built together. The photos on the walls, now mostly of Jake's family, as Eleanor had gradually replaced our wedding pictures. The furniture we had carefully selected, what remained of it after Eleanor's upgrades. The small details that had once made this place feel like home. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. "I never thought it would end like this," I said softly. "I never thought you'd choose anyone over us." Jake finally looked at me, his expression a complex mixture of anger, confusion, and something that might have been regret. But before he could speak, Eleanor appeared at his side, her hand possessive on his shoulder. "It's for the best, dear," she said to me with false sympathy. "Not everyone is cut out for family life." The cruelty of that statement, given my background as an orphan who had longed for family my entire life, was so breathtaking that I couldn't form a response. Instead, I turned and walked out the door of my own home, the weight of humiliation and heartbreak almost unbearable, as I felt the curious eyes of neighbours watching from their windows. I had just reached the sidewalk when I heard footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw Jake jogging toward me, his face flushed. "Wait," he called. "Your bag, let me see what you're taking." Disbelief washed over me. "Excuse me. Mom says you might be taking things that aren't yours. I need to check your bag." The accusation was so outrageous, so completely detached from reality, that for a moment I thought I might be dreaming this entire horrific scenario. Not mine. "These are my personal documents, Jake. Just let me see," he insisted, reaching for my bag. I stepped back, clutching it to my chest. "No, these are my things. This is my house," he said, his voice rising, "and I have a right to know what you're taking from it." Before I could react, Jake lunged forward and grabbed the strap of my bag, yanking it forcefully. The sudden movement caught me off balance, and I stumbled, my grip loosening just enough for Jake to wrench the bag away. "Give that back," I demanded, reaching for it as Jake unzipped it and began rifling through the contents. We struggled on the front lawn, the humiliation compounding as I saw curtains twitching in neighbouring houses. Eleanor stood in the doorway, watching, making no move to intervene in the scene she had orchestrated. In our struggle, the bag tipped, spilling its contents onto the grass. My passport, nursing licence, and the folded copy of our house deed scattered at our feet. On top of the pile lay a small velvet pouch containing my mother's necklace, a simple gold chain with a small sapphire pendant that had somehow survived the accidental breaking of the glass bird. Jake stared at the documents, then at me, confusion replacing his anger. "This is what you're trying to hide, your own papers. What did you think I was taking, Jake? The silver, the family jewels, your mother's precious heirlooms." He had the decency to look embarrassed as he bent to help gather the spilled items. When he picked up the velvet pouch and opened it, recognition flickered in his eyes. "Your mum's necklace," he said quietly. "Yes, the only thing I have left from her since your mother broke the bird." I snatched the pouch from his hands and began collecting the rest of my documents. Jake watched me silently, the reality of what he had just done, accosting his wife on their front lawn over her personal identification documents, seemingly sinking in. "Sophia, I cut him off, straightening with my now refilled bag clutched protectively. "You've made your choice, Jake. You chose Eleanor over our marriage, over our home, over the life we built together. You can have the house, but you don't get to take my self-respect too." Amanda's car pulled up to the curb at that moment, her expression alarmed as she took in the scene. Me with tear-streaked cheeks, documents clutched to my chest, Jake standing awkwardly on the lawn, and Eleanor watching from the doorway, like a general surveying a successful battle. As I moved toward the car, Jake called after me one last time. "Where will you go?" I turned to face him, suddenly feeling stronger despite everything I had lost. "That's no longer your concern, but don't worry, I'm sure your mother will take excellent care of you." I got into Amanda's car without looking back, though I could feel Eleanor's triumphant gaze burning into me as we drove away. Only when we turned the corner did I finally break down, sobs racking my body as the full weight of what had just occurred crashed over me. "I've lost everything," I whispered. Amanda reached over and squeezed my hand. "No, you haven't. You've lost a house. You've lost a husband who didn't deserve you. But you found something more important." "What's that?" I asked through my tears. "Your backbone," she replied firmly. "And trust me, you're going to need it for what comes next." That night in Amanda's spare bedroom, surrounded by the few possessions I had managed to take with me, I experienced grief unlike anything I'd felt since losing my parents. It wasn't just the loss of my home or even my marriage that cut so deeply, it was the betrayal by the person I had trusted most, the person who had promised to be my family when I had none. Amanda sat with me as I cried, offering tissues and quiet support. When I finally exhausted myself, she helped me make a plan. "First thing tomorrow, we contact your attorney," she said practically. "You need to understand your rights regarding the house." The attorney's news was both reassuring and infuriating. Despite Jake's apparent efforts to edge me out, my name remained on the deed as co-owner. The house could not legally be sold or significantly modified without my consent. Furthermore, the fact that I had been essentially forced out of my own home could work in my favour in divorce proceedings, something I hadn't even had time to process, was now inevitable. "What about the bank accounts?" I asked, thinking of the money Jake had been diverting. "We'll need a full financial discovery," the attorney explained. "But as your husband Jake has certain fiduciary responsibilities, if he's been hiding or diverting marital assets that won't reflect well on him in court." 2 days after being expelled from my home, I received a text from Jake, asking where I'd gone in case of emergency. I didn't respond. 3 days after that, I was served with divorce papers. "Eleanor convinced him to file first," the attorney said after reviewing the documents. "The petition claims you abandoned the marital home." I laughed bitterly. "Abandoned, I was kicked out. We'll counter that." But this confirms what I suspected: his mother is heavily involved in directing this divorce. The realization that Eleanor was orchestrating the legal dissolution of my marriage, just as she had orchestrated my expulsion from my home, ignited something in me. The initial shock and grief began to harden into determination. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. I threw myself into strategizing with my attorney. We documented my financial contributions to the marriage and home, compiled evidence of the joint accounts Jake had tampered with, and prepared a counter-petition that detailed the circumstances of my departure from the house. Amanda continued to provide both emotional support and practical assistance. Her spare room became my sanctuary as I rebuilt my sense of self one piece at a time. Other co-workers rallied around me as well, offering everything from home-cooked meals to legal recommendations to simple distractions when the pain became too intense. "We never liked Jake anyway," my friend Lucia from pediatrics admitted over coffee one morning. "He always seemed like he was just tolerating your friends, only showing up when he absolutely had to." "And that mother of his gave me the creeps at your wedding," added Denise from radiology. "The way she kept pulling him away from you during the reception, major red flags." Their perspectives helped me see my marriage with new clarity. Had there always been signs that Jake's loyalty was compromised? Had I been so desperate for family that I had overlooked Eleanor's possessiveness? From the beginning, 3 weeks into my stay at Amanda's, my attorney arranged for me to return to the house with a court order allowing me to collect more of my personal belongings. Jake had been notified in advance, and when Amanda drove me there, I was prepared for another confrontation. What I wasn't prepared for was the state of the house. Eleanor had wasted no time in further erasing my presence. The few remaining photos of me had been removed from the walls. The guest room where my things had been relocated before my departure had been completely redecorated as a formal sitting room. Most of my clothes and personal items had been boxed up and stacked in the garage. "Where's the rest of my stuff?" I asked Jake, who hovered uncomfortably as I sorted through the boxes. "What do you mean?" "My books, my collection of vintage nursing texts, my winter clothes, my jewelry box." Jake shifted his weight nervously. "Mom thought it would be easier to declutter while we were at it. Some things might have been donated." "Donated?" I repeated incredulously. "Those were my possessions, Jake." The attorney stepped in. "Mr. Harper disposal of Mrs. Harper's personal property without consent could be considered conversion or even theft. I suggest you make every effort to recover any items that have been donated or otherwise disposed of." Eleanor appeared in the garage doorway, her expression sour. We assumed she wouldn't be coming back for them. The house needed organising. The house, I said, looking directly at her, is still partially mine, as I'm sure your lawyer has informed you by now. Her lips thinned. Temporary technicalities. Despite the missing items, I managed to recover more clothes, some important paperwork Jake had overlooked, and a few sentimental items that had evidently been deemed not worth donating. As we prepared to leave, I took one last look around what had been my home for 5 years. I built a life here, I said quietly to no one in particular. I deserved better than this. Over the following weeks, the divorce proceedings began in earnest. I was stunned to discover through financial disclosure that Jake had been more influenced by Eleanor than I had realized. Beyond the joint account they had opened together, he had been making regular transfers to Eleanor's personal account ostensibly for household expenses, though the amounts far exceeded any reasonable costs. She was using your joint funds to redecorate the house you were being pushed out of, my attorney explained. That's going to look very bad to a judge. As predicted, Eleanor attended every meeting, every deposition, sitting beside Jake like a sentinel. His few attempts to speak to me directly were always interrupted by her whispered advice or outright intervention. 3 months after being kicked out, I received an unexpected text from Jake. Can we talk alone? Against Amanda's advice, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop halfway between our workplaces. To my surprise, he arrived without Eleanor. You look good, he said awkwardly after we'd ordered. It was true, I had lost the perpetual anxiety that had marked my last months in our home. My shoulders no longer hunched with tension, and I had started taking better care of myself, no longer walking on eggshells to avoid criticism. What do you want, Jake? I asked directly. He fidgeted with his coffee cup. I've been thinking, maybe we could work something out. This divorce is getting expensive. Work something out how? If you came home, he said quietly, we could put this behind us. Mom says she'd be willing to try again if you're more understanding of her situation. I stared at him, astonished by the audacity. Let me get this straight. After kicking me out of my own home, filing for divorce, claiming I abandoned you, allowing your mother to dispose of my possessions, and fighting me on every financial aspect of our separation, you want me to come back and be more understanding of Eleanor? Jake had the grace to look embarrassed. It's just, the lawyer says the house situation is complicated, and financially, it would be better for everyone if I came back and let Eleanor continue to dominate our lives, I interrupted. No, Jake. There's no going back. You made your choice, and now we both have to live with it. Is it the money? He pressed. Because I could increase the settlement offer if... It's not about money, I said, my voice steady. It's about respect. It's about partnership. It's about the fact that when forced to choose between your wife and your mother, you chose your mother without hesitation. That's not something I can forgive or forget. Jake's expression hardened. You're being unreasonable, just like Mum said. I smiled sadly. And there it is. You still don't see it, do you? Even now you're filtering everything through her perspective. I stood to leave, but before I did, I placed my hand gently on his arm. I loved you, Jake. I wanted a life with you. But I've realized I deserve someone who puts our relationship first. I hope someday you understand what you gave up. The divorce proceedings continued now with increased tension. Eleanor seemed to take my rejection of Jake's reconciliation attempt as a personal affront, and their legal strategy became more aggressive. But my attorney was prepared. During the final hearing, when assets were being divided, my testimony about being forced out of my own home resonated with the judge. The financial evidence showing Jake's diversion of funds to Eleanor further damaged his position. Most damning was the documentation of how my personal property had been treated. Photos of boxes stacked carelessly in the garage, evidence of items donated without my consent, and receipts showing Eleanor's extensive redecorating, using our joint funds while I was living in a friend's spare room. Mrs. Harper, the judge said after hearing all the evidence, it appears to me that there was significant interference in your marriage by a third party and that your husband failed to maintain appropriate boundaries. The house was purchased with substantial contribution from you, and you were wrongfully deprived of its use. The final ruling granted me half the value of the house. Jake would either need to buy out my share, or the house would be sold and proceeds divided along with a greater portion of our other assets than is typical given the evidence of financial impropriety. As we left the courtroom, I saw Eleanor berating Jake in the hallway, her face flushed with anger. For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity for him. He was as much Eleanor's victim as I was, though he couldn't see it yet, but my pity was tempered by the memory of his betrayal and the knowledge that he had chosen this path. 6 months after being kicked out of my house, I was settling into a new chapter of my life. The divorce settlement had provided me with enough money to secure a small but charming apartment in a neighborhood I had always loved, but Jake had deemed too artsy. I had furnished it entirely to my own taste. No compromises, no critiques, no rearrangements when I wasn't looking. The financial security from the settlement also allowed me to reduce my hours at the hospital and focus on a specialized certification in pediatric emergency nursing, something I had wanted to pursue for years but had put off to accommodate our joint financial goals and Eleanor's increasing demands on my time at home. Therapy had become an essential part of my healing process. My therapist helped me recognize the red flags I had missed in both Jake and Eleanor's behavior, and to understand why, given my background in foster care and deep longing for family, I had been particularly vulnerable to their manipulation. "You were looking for the family you never had," my therapist explained, "which made you willing to tolerate behavior that might have been deal breakers for someone with a stronger family foundation." I reconnected with friends who had gradually been pushed away during Eleanor's reign, dinner parties, without fear of sabotage, movie nights, without interruption, weekend trips without guilt. The freedom to simply be myself, without constant evaluation, was intoxicating. Through mutual friends, I heard that Jake had finally asked Eleanor to move out reportedly after a particularly intense argument about the house. The financial strain of the divorce settlement, combined with the ongoing costs of maintaining both our former home and Eleanor's original house, which had never been sold, had apparently forced a reckoning. "She's telling everyone who'll listen that you ruined her son financially," my friend Denise reported after running into Eleanor at the grocery store. "Apparently, she's had to move back to her own place because Jake can't afford to keep both houses anymore." I felt no satisfaction in their difficulties, only a quiet relief that Jake might finally be establishing some independence from his mother's control. Jake attempted to contact me several times after the divorce was finalized, first with practical questions about mail that had been delivered to the house, then with increasingly personal overtures. I maintained strict boundaries, responding only to necessary communications and ignoring the rest. At work, I found myself mentoring a younger nurse named Tasha, who was experiencing similar issues with her fiancé's mother. "She criticizes everything I do," Tasha confided during a quiet moment in our shift, "and my fiancé always takes her side." I shared my story with her not to frighten her, but to help her recognize the importance of establishing clear boundaries before marriage. "If he can't put your relationship first now," I advised, "marriage won't magically change that." 2 weeks later, Tasha tearfully thanked me. We had a serious talk about his mom's behavior. He finally saw what was happening, and we're postponing the wedding until we can work through this in couples therapy. My professional life flourished as I channeled more energy into my career. The pediatric certification led to a promotion and leadership role in the emergency department, where my experiences had given me not just clinical expertise, but emotional resilience and strength under pressure. "Nothing seems as intimidating after what you've been through," Amanda remarked one day as we watched me handle a department crisis with unexpected calm. The first holiday season after the divorce was both difficult and liberating. No tense family dinners with Eleanor's passive-aggressive comments. No arguments about whose traditions would be honoured. I accepted an invitation from Amanda and her husband to join their family celebration, and though there were moments of sadness, there was also a profound sense of peace. I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been suppressed or criticised during my marriage, my love of bold colours that Eleanor had deemed tacky, my interest in documentary photography that Jake had called a waste of time, my preference for spontaneous adventures over rigidly scheduled activities. As winter turned to spring, I found myself feeling genuinely happy for the first time in years. My apartment had become a true sanctuary, not the dream house I had lost, but something equally valuable, a space that was completely mine, filled with only positive energy and memories. Almost exactly 1 year after being expelled from my home, I encountered Jake unexpectedly at a coffee shop near the hospital. He looked different, thinner, older somehow, but also more present than he had been in the final years of our marriage. "Sophia," he said, clearly surprised. "You look wonderful." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "How are you, Jake?" He hesitated. "I'm getting there. I've been seeing a therapist, actually, working on some things." "That's good to hear. My therapist has helped me understand some patterns," he continued, his voice quieter. about my relationship with my mother, about what happened with us. I nodded, unsure what to say. I owe you an apology, Jake said finally. A real one, not the kind I tried to give when I wanted you to come back. I'm sorry for what I did, for not standing up for you, for letting Mom take over our life, for everything. The apology was unexpected, and I felt a complex mix of emotions, validation, lingering hurt, but also a surprising sense of closure. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. Are you? Is there someone new in your life? He asked hesitantly. I shook my head. I'm focusing on myself right now. My career, my interests, rebuilding my life. What about you? How's Eleanor? Jake's expression tightened slightly. We're establishing better boundaries. It's not easy, but it's necessary. She's not happy about it. I can imagine. An awkward silence fell between us. There was so much history, so much pain, but also a strange sense of distance, as if we were speaking across a vast canyon that had opened between our lives. Well, I said, finally gathering my things. I should get back to work. Of course. Jake stepped back to let me pass. It was good to see you, Sophia. As I reached the door, he called after me. Sophia, I hope you find someone who deserves you. I turned and offered a small, genuine smile. I already have Jake, me. Walking back to the hospital, I reflected on how far I had come from that devastating day when I was forced out of my home with just a suitcase and a bag of documents. Losing my house had been painful, but it had led me to find something more valuable: my voice, my strength, my sense of self-worth. The house had been just a structure, walls, and a roof that had become a prison of criticism and manipulation. True home, I had discovered, was something you carried within you, a place of self-respect, authenticity, and peace. As spring bloomed around me, I felt a profound gratitude for the painful lessons that had ultimately led to my freedom. The road ahead was open, full of possibilities that were now truly mine to choose. Sometimes you have to lose the roof over your head to discover the strength within your heart. If you are fighting to be respected in your own home, remember the house is just walls and floors. Your dignity is what makes it a home. And that's something no one can ever truly take from you. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Have you ever had to choose between peace and property? Drop a comment below and let me know how you handled it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience and self-discovery. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, only by how you treat yourself.